I know I can't make it happen, but I know that I can be open to it happen. I'll invite it in, and welcome it, and do everything I can to best support this thing that arrives, that I know is bigger than me.
Yes,
you know,
it's magical. It really is magical.
It really is, and it's the hardest part of that is when something bad happens, and feeling the bad thing, and remembering. Trying to separate ourselves from the thing that happened that didn't work out or didn't go the way we wanted it to go, and to say, okay, imagine that's a scene in a movie. I can't wait to see what happens next. Do you know what I mean? Instead of just sinking into the vibe, because it's the same vibe of when the good thing happens. It's the same. It's like good things happen, bad things happen. That's all part of life. And just sort of staying neutral and riding the wave, you know.
I'm still learning that, you know.
It's hard. It's hard.
That's riding. You said it. Riding that wave. It's hard because you dip down low. Sometimes you get stuck. You know.
Absolutely.
Especially if you're used to the wave going a certain way.
Yes.
You know, and I think that's when you have to kind of lay yourself down and kind of just let it be.
Yeah.
You know, and that's hard. It's hard for me.
Yes.
Very hard for me.
Yes.
That's again that's what off-white sort of means, by the way. It's like it's not black or white. It's off-white too, as well as it's a construct for sort of the biggest box that you could put your own ideals in is choosing, right? Like making a decision to go left or right. I know it's like a brain freeze, but you could go left and right. You know, that's why I call the brand Off-White. That's what the logic is. It's my internal measuring compass to never decide. And I know it hurts your brain, and it does mine too, but it's like I equally can take the compliment, and then I can equally see the backhandedness of it. And it doesn't deter me from the trajectory. I quite frankly look at art history as something to stand up and build. Like, I don't have enough time in my lifetime to spend trying to trick you to invent something. You know, that's a purist sort of nomenclature to sort of keep sort of artists looking like the generations of art before it. But I'm going off on a tangent. I'll stay on course.
Like, that's the main message that I'm delivering, is that most of these hurdles are self-imposed as designers. Like, they literally don't exist. There is no failure. Failure is like as real as like Halloween ghosts. Do you know? And as a designer, I was always like, I literally was like, oh, I'm just going to work in an office. I'm going to work and be an assistant to like a bigger firm in architecture. And then on the weekends, I was going to DJ and be into Supreme shirts or something like that, and go to like Travis Scott shows or something. You know, I was like, that's what life is, 9 to 5. And then the aha moment was like, wait, I can just put work out, and if it's good, it works. If it's bad, no one notices, then I can just get better at it. And then I could run into a friend or a brand and be like, hey, I got an idea, you know. And so that's the reality. That's what I flew in peace out. The cool kids are out. Important. If you, amongst all your studies, amongst like your 9 to 5, all these kids like tuning in on live stream or whatever, like if you just force yourself to do the one project that you believe in and then it exists, that's going to be the one that's going to like lead you on your career, not necessarily the practical ones. So that's just a showcase of what, you know, I believe that everyone should do. And then so going back to that, you also have to have mentors, like dead or alive. You have to sort of connect with some body of work or someone who formulated a thought and an aesthetic and then build yours upon that. What most people won't tell you is that the people that you look up to didn't invent it themselves. You know, everyone has this sort of like, I call it like getting your brain reprogrammed. Like once you sort of learn a thought process, you can actually see yourself in that and add to it. So for that, it's Corbusier for sure. And this kind of dials into that IKEA project when we're sort of trying to solve these this issue of like dwelling and like how do we live in spaces versus how the generation of thinkers before us thought. And Corbusier, obviously thought like a house was a machine to live in. So in that context, like the living room is only for like living, the kitchen's only for eating, the dressing, your bedroom, it's like improper to change in your living room. That's not proper human behavior. And so obviously I have a mentor, I have a sort of thought process and aesthetic that I love, but then once you learn the ethos of why you love the aesthetic, you dig deeper, and then you know how to turn the wheel left or right. So it's important, that's why I often reference things. I'm not ashamed at sort of recognizing these great moments before us, but it should be different. It should feel like we can collectively agree on it, and that's what I focus on in a number of projects. So, sort of moving on a wave, this is also like 2 weeks ago, in Milan, as the Prada Foundation was getting finished, happened to be there meeting with Rem on a project that we're working on. And it was cool. It's like he's discovering this new building the same time me and my friend are there. So it was like a midway break through our conversation. But I strictly love images like this, and I'll show them for forever, just because the generation of thinkers and designers and us are on Earth at the same time. I think it's hypercritical that these loops get made all the time. Students and the people who basically wrote our textbooks. And I'll keep striving to do this and just have conversation. So we spoke, and we're getting in depth on obviously this idea, what he's working on obviously with the countryside, and that if half the world's population is living in cities, then what's happening in the countryside, and how I'm articulating that is what I see in our sort of dynamic. I was just in Soho like an hour and a half ago. It's like there's so many stores are closed. It's like Palace, and there's like Mercer. The end of Mercer is like popping, but all these like vacant there's like literally half of downtown New York is just empty. And it's like, we have Amazon, we're not even shopping as much. Like, and me, I'm in fashion, so how I'm adopting to this whole idea of countryside, like how is that going to change the sort of like hip relationship between cities and the countryside? Are kids now going to like live in Montauk and then go into the cities on the weekend for entertainment? Like, all you need a first floor retail for is basically eating. You don't need to shop. People aren't even shopping in that pace. So the only reason why I bring up this sort of like divergent tangent is because this inspires like how you can design a t-shirt. It helps me think of like, do we need more chairs? So I would urge you guys always to think like abstract and big. Countryside to city is macro, but it's giving me perspective on how to tackle like other projects. Another like super important for me is like Donald Judd in terms of form. Like me personally, I'm trying to find, even though I know my aesthetic, but I'm interested in like the overall form that things are taking.
In the society, if you do less and get more, that's being smart, isn't it? If you do everything and you don't care what you get, that's stupid. But I'm telling you, that's where life is. Those who have lived great lives have always lived like this. They didn't care what they get. They just did what they want to do. Because they were loving what they were doing, everything best in them came out. When the best in them comes out, whatever kind of recognition it gets, whatever happens, happens. The choices that we make in our lives is just this. If it's about making a living, we make one kind of choices. If it's about making a life, we have to make another kind of choice.
To me, that's the way it works. I mean, there's nothing about the shape of the museum that is unchangeable. There's Nothing about it. There's nothing about the shape of art history that's unchangeable. But if you don't believe you have any kind of agency with regards to how those things change, then you're in a sorry state. Because then you're always in an environment where you think things are being imposed on you that are somehow inconsistent with the things that you're interested in, the things you want. When in fact, I mean, those museums didn't exist at one time. Somebody decided they wanted to put that stuff in there. And so I was thinking, well, in the same way that I thought that when I looked at all of these artworks in our history books, that I wanted to be able to do those things too. I just started doing them. I didn't ask anybody if I could. And I wasn't waiting for anybody to tell me I couldn't. And if they had told me I couldn't, I wasn't listening.
While I'm in the dressing room, 5 minutes before I come out, my gloves are laced up. I'm breaking my gloves down. I'm pushing the lever in the back of my glove. I'm breaking the middle of the glove so my knuckle could pierce through the leather. I feel my knuckle piercing against the tight leather gloves on the Everlast boxing glove. When I come out, I have supreme confidence, but I'm scared to death. I'm totally afraid. I'm afraid of everything. I'm afraid of losing. I'm afraid of being humiliated. But I'm totally confident. All during my training, I've been afraid of this man. I thought this man might be capable of beating me. I've dreamed of him beating me. The closer I get to the ring, the more confidence I get. The closer, more confidence I get. The closer, more confidence I get. Once I'm in the ring, I'm a god. No one could beat me.
Wasting your time doubting whether you're going to be successful or not is pointless. It is. I mean, you just put one foot in front of the other. You control what you can't control. And then you see what the outcome is, right? If you win, great. You're going to have to wake up the next day and do the journey over again. If you lose, it sucks, but you're going to have to wake up the next day and do the journey all over again anyway, right? So it's really pointless to sit here and debate or have doubt or this, that, and the other. You train as hard as you can, and you step out there and you let it flow. And being brave in that isolation. And truth be told, bro, if you sat down as entrepreneurs and you pitched an idea to a person, and the person was like, oh, that's a great idea. I see the vision. You got to go and rethink your shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you want to be able to swim in waters nobody else has swam before. Right? You want to be able to carve your own lane in areas that nobody else saw or knew, was possible. So if you do feel that sense of isolation and a little anxiety and fear there, that's a good thing. Yeah. It means you're doing the right thing.
And so you end up with a whole lot of pleasure, but not too much joy. A lot of American culture is a joyless quest for insatiable pleasure. And the pleasure is generated by a certain kind of titillation and stimulation owing to the distractions. You know what Eliot says? You're distracted from distractions by distractions. And so much of the U.S. culture is weapons of mass distraction. And back to your point about education. See, education is about the formation of the right kind of attention to attend to life and death and love and joy and the things that really, really matter. Not the superficial things, but when the superficial things become the most dominant thing, then when younger generation grows up with bombardment to and attention to the superficial, the status, the appearance, the image, the spectacle, and they don't have access to the raw stuff of caring and nurturing that are required for genuine love and joy, then you end up with a whole culture that suffers more and more from the inability to really love in relationships, to love themselves, or to then experience the fruit of love, which is joy. So it's all about pleasure. And you see, that is spiritual decay at its most profound level.
It's really a matter of protecting your dreams, protecting your imagination. That's really the key. And when you do that, then the world just seems limitless.
And when you set your dreams, a lot of times, especially in business and entrepreneurship, you have a big vision, and people will instantly start asking you how you'll do it. And so what we tell people is don't get caught up with the how, because if you know every step to accomplish your dream, you haven't really dreamed big enough. Yeah. You should know every step of the way, and you'll have a tendency to walk it back.
Well, stand as a cross for you to bear, things to go through if you going anywhere. You can't stand without finding your voice. You can't find your voice without courageously, critically examining who you are in relation to the voices of the dead and the present. so that the history of the past and the history of the present go hand in hand if there's going to be a better future, because that's the only way in which people are able to actually bring out the best of who they are. And the best of who they are has everything to do with the best of the humanities. The love of wisdom, the love of justice, the love of neighbor.
We don't make much happen when it comes to creativity. We're just antennas and transistors.
Yes.
We're speakers. You know? We're just lucky to get the transmission.
Yeah.
And that was very important indeed. Why was that so very important? Because like so many young folk, especially young black folk today, who are concerned with being copies rather than originals, who are concerned with being an echo rather than a vision, or who are obsessed with being a professional rather than actually having a vocation and a calling. It was clear you couldn't produce cold sweat if all you had was a dedication to your profession, or if you were obsessed with your career as opposed to calling, or if you actually were producing instead of a rich vision that empowers, a cold stare that sterilizes. Never confuse a vision with a stare. The stare is he or she who's a copy. It was clear when cold sweat hit, something radically new was taking place. And it was not a one-time affair.
Well, you believe in something. You passionately believe in something. So devote yourself to it completely, utterly, and don't apologize for doing it.
You know, these are like, and it's God's plan. This is where the modernity of faith and believing in a higher power, like she said, it's like we're the people that you judge. Like if I drive through a viaduct and I take the time out to like look, and I see people sleeping under the tent, and then I go about my business. I can't tell everyone what to do. This is just how I can go to sleep at night, is to be like, that person's important to me just as much as the people I'm going home to. If we live in the same city, you know, and I drive under there every day, figuratively. So it's like, if it's within our power, you know, and especially it's 2020, everyone is voicing their concern. But if you're voicing it just on Instagram and on Twitter, but then you're like going home and like going to eat, and then you throw the rest of your food out, and you're just like watching Netflix and sneakers, and it's like, you know, I don't find value, and that's my thing. It's like, that's why I live in Chicago. You know, I don't live in whatever, but it's important to me that it's like these, like, how can what I'm doing, and that's what the power of Notre and even this platform for us to speak and tell our story, like not in an interview where someone's asking a question that's like, tell us this, just to sort of write it. It's too much.
We ain't going for those flat questions. Somebody tried to attack Virgil one day in the interview, and I lost it.
As I heard it said, is that people who love you for what you do, ignore them. The people who hate you for what you do, ignore them. Just do your job.
Mm-hmm. Is that part of the reason why you made a decision to publicly say, I'm going to go by my chosen name of chosen name of Yasin Bey or Most Def, and you stopped at that point taking a lot of photos publicly as well? Did that factor into that mind state?
Well, what happened to me, I was at the airport once, and I was coming out of the terminal, coming out of the gate, and someone was like, Mos. And there was an energy that they said it with that made me feel like, oh, I'm a thing to that person.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They don't know me. They know Mos. It was like it was this persona. It was almost felt like they was shouting out like a mascot or something. And I was like, I don't like that. And I was like, there's got to be, for me, there had to be like the me that I know myself as. I had to push that forward to like, keep the weight of any persona from off of me. from and potentially crushing me as a person.
Be this, and obviously, he's super popular, but I wouldn't say that he's playing by what were the industry rules. He's playing by his own set of rules, and he's making the music that he wants to make, and it doesn't fit a format. He doesn't have songs on there that that fit pop radio or that may get 1 billion streams. He just has music that's better than everyone else.
Always been the kind of personality where if I was walking down that boardwalk and I looked over at that ship full of black folks, I wouldn't stop. That's just my personality. Because I've always been like, fuck breaking motherfuckers out of a slave ship. We need to go to where they make the slave ships and burn that shit down. I mean, it's kind of like somebody said, many thousand gone. It's like I just accept that this system, first of all, I believe that everybody gets reincarnated, so it frees me up a little bit. I expect, you know what I'm saying? I'm just saying, I believe it's not about saving individual bodies. It's about how do we affect structural change. That's how I feel about it. So even if I saw my grandmom, I would be like, hesitate for a second, but I probably just wouldn't stop. I would just keep going.
No, but that's called being strategic.
Right? But it requires a kind of dispassionate. It's
you
kind
choose your battle.
Yeah, and it requires a kind of radical, dispassionate kind of thing.
No, we call it detachment.
Yes, detachment. Exactly. Detachment.
Current generation, as the context, is like no one can be in the middle. Like, if there's injustices to humanity, they need to be fought for if you're human or something like that. So is the point, right? Like no one, like what happens is when you're young and you meet like the first roadblock, you automatically are like, man, if people didn't think of me like that, then I could do this. And you get fixated on the struggle for forever. Like, I'm sitting here carrying on stuff that a professor, like I had a professor tell me that I wasn't going to be an architect. And I was like, what do you mean by like a master's degree? Like, I'm paying you to get a degree and you're telling me that when I finish, I won't become what I'm here to do. Like that puzzled me. And I get up today in opposition to something someone said to me one time, 30 years ago.
Michael Jordan?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, definitely. Like, say hi to the guy when you're leaving the restaurant because stuff. And I think if you look at it in inverse, instead of being like angry or motivated or feel like I have to disprove that, like that struggle, that's the point. Like if you don't have, and often we look at the other side and of course we're here trying to rid the world of that, but that is like the most valuable, it's literally the most valuable constant motivator you could ever have is disproving something or some context. And so it helps you understand life isn't a pain in the ass and like you're running into walls all the time. Once you realize that is the point of life, like that's the greatest stories ever told, the hero's journey from Star Wars to the Bible. Like it works in an arc. It doesn't work in a straight line. And if I had known that when I was younger, I might have been, who am I kidding? I'd be in the same spot that I am now.
I'm not all what you think I am. I'm very different than that. I have something else to do. You, for me, are my prisoner. You are my warden. I am battling you. Not you, Terry. But you, the English, you, the French. A whole way of life, a whole system of thought, which has kept me in prison until this hour.
Well, the theme that unites these lectures is creativity and the techniques by which the artist can refine his or her vision, expand the vision, communicate the vision. And before I get into that issue, what is it in and of itself? And when I think like that, of course, I cast my mind back to nature. Nature is the great visible engine of creativity against which all other creative efforts are measured. And creativity in nature has a curious distribution. It's something which accumulates through time. If we stand back and look at the universe, we see that at its earliest moments, it was very simple. It was a plenum. It was without characters. Creativity is conserved, that the universe becomes more creative. And out of that state of creative fecundity, more creativity is manifest. So that from that point of view, the universe is almost what we would have to call an art-making machine.
Desire will set the direction, but desire will not make you win. Winning needs competence. Competence doesn't drop from the sky. For every successful person, there is a painful story. Painful does not mean you suffered. Painful means there is a lot of things. Competence is built. Well, some natural skills may be there, but it has to be worked at minutely. To reach somewhere, there is a meticulous process. You have to pay attention to little things about yourself that nobody even cares to notice in their life.
Time to put myself in environments where I felt good. I'm just being real. It does something to me. The whole shit. Yemen, Iraq, Baltimore, on and on. And to know that this is not an isolated moment in history, this is some sort of continuum of something that's completely whack to begin with. So if people don't see me around in America physically, that don't mean that I'm gone. And I'm critical of all of the governments around the world and the corporations, to be honest, you know. With that being said, my country is called Earth. This whole thing belongs to everybody that's on it. And if there's anything that I can do with my career, is to hopefully encourage the generations around me and after me to have that worldview.
You can't talk about the struggle for human freedom unless you talk about the different dimensions of what it is to be human. And when we're talking about art, you're talking about meaning, you're talking about love, you're talking about resistance, you're talking about imagination, you're talking about empathy. All of these are part and parcel of what it is to talk about human freedom. And so art is about those who have the courage to use bits of reality to get us to see reality in light of a new reality. So it's about vision by means of imagination. It's about empathy in terms of looking through this world and seeing the possibilities of a new world, a better world, a more decent, a more compassionate world. And so be one a painter, musician, sculptor, dancer. In fact, be one a human being who aspires to learn the art of living. Because in the end, I think that's what the arts are really about. How do we become, all of us become artists of living?
And I totally believe that. I believe that a healthy person is a person who doesn't have to hide anything. My mother always used to call me King David, and she would say to me, David, you have golden hands, you can do anything you want. But of course, I thought my mother was nuts. I was a poor student, I didn't get any good grades, I wasn't doing well in school. There was no word dyslexia when I was a kid. If you had it, you were just dumb. You know where you stand in your class. You know who are the smart kids and who aren't the smart kids. And believe me, not only did I know that I wasn't one of the smart kids, so did everybody else in the class. So I feared that I'd never accomplish anything really wonderful and that I'd have an incredibly ordinary and boring life. And it scared me.
I think David knew that he wanted out of Brooklyn, wanted
out of being poor, wanted to be somebody, and was motivated enormously to have a lot of money. I knew that I would never end up in a store, going to the same storefront every day. I thought, if I have a job like that, I'll kill myself. I don't think that I really had a full understanding of how difficult it had been for my mother. You know, she supported the family. My father worked only intermittently as a pattern cutter. He was an intellectual. He used to read books in French, and I think I gave him a hard time because we didn't have much money and he didn't work very hard, and my mother did. I had a lot of judgment about those things.
Get into a figurative future that shapes the world. And if you think about the past and you think about the canon, what becomes the new norm was a almost controversial or a risky move in the past, but we associate the past with its iconography. And I think the message that I'm spreading to the community at CAFA in its design career is to make controversial moves with respect, to make risky projections of the future that are founded on a rationale, just the same way as Duchamp was earlier in the presentation. And you will arrive at the investigations that will be the next foundation for the future.
There may not be, as much humanity in the world as one would like to see, but there is some. There's more than one would think. In any case, if you break faith with what you know, that's a betrayal of many, 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 many people. I may know 6 people, but that's enough. Love has never been a popular movement, and no one's ever wanted really to be free. The world is held together, really it is held together, by the love and the passion of very few people. Otherwise, of course, you can despair. Walk down the street of any city, any afternoon, and look around you. What you got to remember is what you're looking at is also you. Everyone you're looking at is also you. You could be that person. You could be that monster. You could be that cop. And you have to decide in yourself not to be. Anyway, it's too easy. It's too fashionable.